Content warning. This assessment of Sea of Stars contains significant plot lines from the game and several other RPGs. This video also contains discussions of death, grief, and is kind of a low point in general. If you want to experience the game before you play this video, then consider this your spoiler warning. I'm serious, the video opens with a spoiler, so turn back now. Grief is a hell of a thing. Grief is both a tormenting feeling of loss and a comforting balm to soothe those who are mourning. When one loses a friend or loved one to death, it can be disorienting and world-ending. When I started playing Sea of Stars, I was not expecting to go on this type of journey. The further I got into the game, the more I saw the constant loss experienced by this world. Sea of Stars reminded me of other gaming tragedies that I've seen and really enjoyed, and actually hit really close to home for me personally. I wanted to take a little bit of time to discuss Sea of Stars, its excellent writing and fantastic world building, and how it helps to touch on the themes of deep sadness in a lush, vibrant, and charismatic world. Grab yourself a flask of borrowed time because I feel the call of the Sea of Stars. Before I get to the story, I'd like to talk a little bit about grief for a second. Firstly, I'm not a psychologist, so think of this more as an essay about grief than a scientific study about it. Merriam-Webster's dictionary has two definitions, and while both could be applied to gaming, we are going to be focusing on the first definition. And while I'll be discussing the grief that I have and continue to personally experience, this is not meant to be a pity party. Rather, I'd like to take some time to just discuss the theory of grief in games in general. Many games are tragedies in one sense or another, and thanks to the American healthcare system, it might be the cheapest way that many people can process these types of emotions. So I would like to encourage game developers to continue striving for that level of writing and world building that can help make these stories more engaging. I also think that it's healthy and important for people to experience grief. We all will eventually experience loss, and people need help going through difficult times. And I know that because I've been there. Having some experience with grief, then, will help you prepare for pushing past the grief, allowing you to succeed the way Zale and Valir did in Sea of Stars. Speaking of which, Sea of Stars released on August 29th, 2023 for the PC, PS5, PS4, Xbox Series, and Switch. And it's primarily the story of three friends. Two of the friends are solstice warriors named Valir and Zale. The third member of your party is a warrior cook named Garl. Their childhood connection is explored in the opening and does a good job of establishing the world and each character's place in it. Burgraves and Erlina are introduced as more senior solstice warriors, as well as Moraine, who is the head of their magical order. When Zale and Valir are old enough, they are taken from their lives in Mooncradle Village to train at the Zenith Academy with Headmaster Moraine, and the only other two surviving solstice warriors, Burgraves and Erlina, who we met earlier. Wait, what? That's right, the game starts with basically all the solstice warriors dead. Dead! Jedi dead! Order 66 dead! What a way to kick off an adventure. So a lot is riding on Valir and Zale's training, which provides a tutorial for the rest of the game. I'll get to the mechanics of the game in the next section, but the act of being removed from your town and best friends brings up what I'm going to call a parallel grief. This is a touch point that I think many people would associate with grief, and I have experienced myself. And this helps us to get more invested in the friendship of the characters. In the case of Garl, the pain of losing friends for what amounts to a lifetime in the life of a child, he maintains his connections to his childhood friends. His tenacity in finding ways to sneak Zale and Valir cookies brought me back to the homemade goods that people sent to me while I was in basic training and while deployed in Afghanistan. Being taken and secluded from my everyday life echoed Zale and Valir's training, and Garl's small act of kindness resonated with me. While cookies might seem like a small consolation at the loss of a friend and the uncertainty of your future friendship, small acts like this can be the thing that is needed to get through the most difficult separation. While I have lost friends from my periods of absence due to the military, and just from moving place to place, It's important that you find value in the time that you have with those friends, even if they don't necessarily stay in your life forever. Good memories are good memories, and while thinking of them can make me a little sad, I recognize that I'm stronger for their involvement. The process of moving from grief to gratitude took a long time for me. I think, though, that as Garl showed us, gratitude for companionship from our friends can help strengthen our resolve to push forward and have a positive effect on the friends that we have now. The combat in this game is turn-based, and if you've ever played an RPG between 1985 and, say, today, you're likely to have played a game that has a turn-based battle system. The way Sabotage has chosen to mix up the format is quite interesting. For one, regular physical attacks both refill your mana gauge and drop Eclipse Orbs. These can be absorbed to power up physical attacks, as well as add a status effect to the attack. Each opponent has a clock indicating how many turns it will elapse before they act next, as well as a slot machine-style gauge that has wheels with images on them. Each image corresponds to the attributes of an action taken while in combat. When I attack with Zale, for example, it reduces the total power of an opponent's next action. Now, you might also have seen that while I only attacked with one character, I was able to knock off both sword icons. This is due to a timing system that grants a player an extra strike if you time a button press. The system is engaging and constantly adapting to new party members, so switching out party members to reduce these slot wheels as much as possible becomes a necessity. And I really like that because then I get to play with all the characters. While many reviewers have likened this combat system to Super Mario RPG, I haven't gotten a chance to play that game just yet. Rather, this combat system harkens to the combo systems of two other RPGs that I've played. The Legend of Dragoon is an epic 4-disc RPG that has a timing component for both its physical attacks, items, and Dragoon attacks. Sea of Stars obviously has a more expanded system than Legend of Dragoon. It shows that even in the year 2000, developers were already looking for ways to keep players engaged in combat. Radiant Historia, while also a turn-based RPG, engages with combat in a grid. Your goal is to time attacks that push all enemies into groups and do attacks on that grid slot, hitting all the enemies in that condensed space. Sea of Stars, similarly, can move our heroes to other parts of the battle map or even push enemies close so they are grouped up for easy whacking. I think it's a striking coincidence, though, that each of these games is also a tragedy. The Legend of Dragoon sees Dart, the sole surviving victim of a dragon attack on his town, teaming up with the last living giant, an outcast wingling, the person behind the death of his parents. Even Levitz, a party member and a knight in the King's Guard, dies in this game. In Radiant Historia, likewise, it's slowly revealed that Stock must sacrifice himself to stop the desertification of this world. And your party members even try to find other ways to get around it, but you push on like Garl did after taking the Flask of Borrowed Time. While the perfect ending has another character sacrificing himself for Stock, the ending is also a tragedy. Desertification only is pushed back, but with more time to try and stop it forever. The world is set on a handful of islands, and you gain access to a ship to travel between them. Each island has its own little vibe and unique traversal mechanics. This often felt similar to Golden Sun, where each mini area requires specific synergy to traverse the dungeon's puzzles. After getting your first cross-sea voyage thrown by a giant statue named Yeet, you start gaining new equipment that allows you to push boxes and whatnot. You can unlock shortcuts, which I think is a nice touch for the minimal backtracking that you have to do. And the music for this game is amazing. Composed by Eric W. Brown, who works for Sabotage Games, who also did the music for The Messenger, and Yasunori Mitsuda, who is best known for his work on the Chrono and Xeno series of games. It looks like they worked in a highly collaborative manner to make this game feel like an SNES game, and give weight to both the geographic area and the heavy story beat. And I guess that brings us back here. I hope that the times that you have to go to an event like this are few and far between. In October 2013, my dad, Alan Smith, went to the ER with stomach pain and was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. He was a musician, a traveler, and most of all, someone who lived on borrowed time. I remember talking to him late at night in the desert north of LA. Acton, California, where I lived with my dad for a short time, is over 4,000 feet above sea level. At night it gets chilly because of the elevation, but you are treated to an explosion of light and color, cosmic art among the sea of stars. I thought about the songs we played together and the meals that we cooked. We talked about music and we talked about girls. And we also talked about, what's all this about? What's life about? But the most important lesson that I learned from my dad was echoed in Garl's story. That when you know you're on borrowed time, you need to take on every day with purpose. And I think that makes me unable to review Sea of Stars objectively. My grief at the loss of my father, though a decade old, will never fully pass. Like Zale and Valir learn, death is a one-way veil. But knowing that you're not the only person who's dealt with this issue, it at least helps you to feel like you aren't alone. Sea of Stars is hauntingly bleak, but sometimes the most impactful art is dark, comes from a place of utter loss, and sits in the darkness with you. The horrible crows wail in a smoke-filled venue about the pain from a wounded heart. You know how that feels because you've had your heart broken, and your heart breaks a little for him.
And how about this for a good word? Maybe we don't ever come down, and I can leave the wound wide open, and maybe see if I can tough it out, and let it pour over my head, all your shame and your history, and see if I say a thing as it rolls up inside of me.
Bing Bong chooses to be forgotten so that Joy can go on to say Riley. And we all feel the pain of the childhood innocence that we lose growing up. And when Dwight fires Jim so that he and Pam can receive severance pay, well, there's grief there too. You can see that in Dwight's eyes at the end of the episode. Even though it's just acting, they've spent almost a decade working alongside each other. I can imagine the grief of the upcoming loss of a friendship. Again, continuing the theme of borrowed time. So I didn't expect to get a game that sat with me in the sadness the way it did, but here I am. I hope this doesn't discourage you from picking up a copy of Sea of Stars, or checking it out on Game Pass or PlayStation Plus, I think it's on. But Sabotage has really treated me to an excellent game, and I can't wait to see what they do next. So thanks for sitting in the grief with me for a little bit. I promise next week's video will be a little bit happier, and we'll see you tonight.